Thanks, Bante, for coming after a long time.
Yeah.
Yes. So there are a few questions, Bante. Can we start?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, Bante. Bante, when one understands Sammāditthi, it means one can be Sotapanna. How it can be happen only the basis of Sammāditthi?
There are two levels of Sammāditthi, and the mundane or lokiya level of Sammāditthi is in many ways similar to faith. It means the acceptance of certain principles, certain underlying ideas about life, about what is good, what is bad, what is best. And these provide the conceptual framework on which to follow the path of the Buddha. That level of Sammāditthi is essential for liberation, but it is not enough in itself. The Lokuttara level of Sammāditthi is the clear experiential understanding, penetration of the Four Noble Truths. So our path of practice begins with Sammāditthi on the worldly or the mundane level, and culminates in Sammāditthi on the Lokuttara level, which signals the attainment of one of the four levels of enlightenment.
Bante, second question. Lord Buddha fulfilled Paramis for eons. Which force made him fulfilling Paramis?
I'm sorry, I missed that. Which?
What made him to fulfill his Parami?
What made him to accumulate the Pārami, or to?
I ask again. Lord Buddha fulfilled Paramis for eons. Which force made him fulfilling Pārami?
I can't understand. I'm sorry. Which force?
Yeah, which force made him to fulfill the Pārami?
Sorry, what was the last word before Pārami?
Force.
Sorry, to the very last part of the question, I still can't hear clearly.
Bante, question is, Lord Buddha fulfilled his Pārami for eons. Which force made him to fulfill his Pārami?
Yeah, I can't understand the last word before Pārami. Which force led him to?
Yes, Bante. Which force led him to fulfill his Pārami?
I still let me just talk about Pārami. I'm sorry, I'm getting old now. My ear's not so good. Well, the Buddha to be, the Bodhisattva means the Buddha to be, and his initial inspiration came from as in the time of a previous Buddha, and that was what set him off on the path of practice. In fact, if we look in the Buddha's discourses, in the suttas themselves, he never refers to the 10 Pāramis, which form the basis of the Theravada commentarial tradition. And in fact, this is one of the teachings which there is a deviation or distinction from the Mahayana tradition, in which they single out 6 Pāramis. So the as I understand it, the commentators went through the Jataka stories and extracted from the Jataka stories this list of 10 virtues, but I don't believe myself that it's like a curriculum for the Bodhisattva, that now you're a Bodhisattva, you have to fulfill these 10 Pāramis in the way that it is sometimes presented. Nevertheless, I think that they are all very important qualities, of course, to develop. And I think that it is worthy of note that the last Pārami to be developed is the final step on that journey towards the last lifetime as Bodhisattva, was one in which he fulfilled the Pārami of Dana. And so the abandonment, I think, would probably be reasonable case of his children, rather than being an indication that Buddhism has a low opinion of family and family obligations, is on the contrary a point that is considered, of all the practices over many eons, the final and most difficult thing for the Bodhisattva to accomplish was letting go of this strong ties of love to his children. And of course, in the Jataka story, then there was we can say, a happy ending. But it is indicative of the fact that not just Buddhists, but any follower of the Buddha, any Savaka, can only realize this uncompletely unbounded and appamanya state of metta and love and kindness, when his heart is not tied to any particular human being or family member. So that is to accomplish that great boundless metta. Then the Savaka, and following in the footsteps of the Bodhisattva himself, has to learn to abandon those ties of familial love. So I apologize if I've not answered the question, but I hope that I've made some reasonable or interesting comment about the Pārami. And I don't know, is there a way I can read these questions as well? I don't know how to do.
Okay, Bhante, I'm posting this question in chat box.
I don't have to bring them up on my screen. I'm not very. Anyway, maybe carry on with the next question.
Okay, Bhante.
No, sir. Okay.
Okay. This question asked by Mr. Ravindra, he say he got the answer. Okay.
Thank you, Bhante.
Okay.
Bhante, please explain annihilation. I'm sorry, I'm not able to understand. View rises in the world because people don't understand origin of the world. And in eternalism, view rises in the world because people don't understand cessation of the world. Regarding Sammāditthi, please explain.
So the one way that or one way of looking at Sammāditthi, or the as the middle way, the middle path, is the path between eternalism and annihilationism. And so I always found it very profound and very, very, very interesting that the Buddha should point to the underlying reasons why eternalism and annihilationism are so popular, and what is the psychological reasons why those are so attractive views. And given that the Buddha's teaching is based upon the principle that liberation, true peace, true happiness comes through understanding, then he points out that the annihilationist, the eternalist view is based upon a lack of observation of cessation. So if we're in our practice, in our meditation, in our daily life, if we are observing the five khandhas, observing the body and the mind, then we are observing arising and passing away. And the more we observe passing away of every single phenomena of which we are conscious in our lives, then the idea of an eternal state which does not pass away becomes to seem unlikely, unbelievable, impossible even. And similarly with annihilationism, that is based upon the lack of observation of the arising of phenomena. So, I really explained them back to front. So if we say arising comes first, through lack of observation, how things arise through causes and conditions, lack of awareness of that can condition a belief that death, physical death, is the end of everything. And with the repeated observation of arising, annihilationism seems less and less likely and convincing and impossible. Seeing passing away similarly undermines and eventually destroys the belief in eternalism. So these two ideas, that after you die, you go to eternal heaven or eternal hell, or the idea that after you die, there's nothing, the Buddha is not arguing with these as philosophical positions, but I think a quite revolutionary approach. He's saying that these ideas derive their power from lack of observation of the body and mind, and that they lose their power and eventually disappear through profound understanding and penetration of the three characteristics.
Bhante, if someone practicing Dhamma and somehow he broke Shila, then he or she tend to get consequences in short duration with compared to non-practicing Dhamma person.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I think I agree. Actually, it's somehow I don't have any scriptural backing for this, but from my own observation, it seems that Dhamma practice seems to speed up the results of Kamma. I think it's clearer with bad Kamma and breaking precepts. but I wouldn't be confident enough to lay this down as a kind of a rule of Dhamma. But just from my own experience over years, with many monks and nuns and observation, I would say I'm broadly in agreement with that. Yes, I can't explain why. I remember when I first started to practice, so I was in Bodh Gaya in 1976, and that was when I first met people doing the Tibetan purification practices. There were a number of Westerners there doing the 100,000 prostrations. And speaking with, I still remember this, speaking with one or two of them, they would say that almost everyone got sick doing them, and that their teacher had explained that this is what happens through these purification practices, that you speed up the karmic result of impurities in the past. So that was an idea, belief, if you like, from Tibetan tradition. But as I say, I'm broadly in agreement with it.
Bhante, do you encourage meditator to involve in academic activities which are highly critical and activate the mind? What is your suggestion?
Well, it would depend on the on the person, really, and their role, and if they are, if their livelihood is dependent upon using their brain, and I recommend people to develop an interest and curiosity and wish to be good at what they do. And if they're academics, to be good academics, and that means to be reading a lot, and so that's not a very peaceful activity sometimes. That's part of the Kamma of academic livelihood. As regards Dhamma practitioners generally, then I would point you to the threefold structure of pariyatti, patibatti, and pativeta. And here I would explain pariyatti to mean that study of the teachings which provides the firm foundation for patibatti and then eventually pativeta, or liberation. So I think that without any study at all, then one can easily get lost, get caught up in one's own views and opinions, and that's dangerous. So there needs to be a certain amount of time spent on studying the Buddhist teachings, and this does not have to undermine or be in any way harmful to meditation practice if reading is taken on as a Dhamma practice, and one reads with discipline, not just as an escape from meditation, read a book instead and get inspired quickly, but to supplement one's understanding and to make sure that you have right view. There are so many different approaches and views out there these days that it's good to have some good theoretical basis for one's own understanding. But I'm not in favor of study for its own sake or as an intellectual pastime, which study can easily become. And I think I'm I may say that sometimes I feel Abhidhamma scholars get caught up in that. It's just so profound and so absorbing that it's easy to forget that all studies should be within the context of the Eightfold Path, or in the idiom I used just a few moments ago, of pariyati patibati pativeta. So you should always have the end in mind. Why study this? What's the purpose? So I think study provides information, and it provides encouragement or inspiration. So those are the things you want. You want knowledge, basis of right view, and something which is encouraging, inspiring, uplifting at certain times. But I think it's also clear that some people can read books and their minds become focused and gives rise to joy and piti in the Dhamma and contributes very effectively towards their overall practice. Whereas other people read and their mind become full of agitation or full of doubts, and they're just not able to benefit in the same way from study. So this requires you to take a really close look at yourself and see whether, to what extent, you can use study of suttas and study of the teachings in our tradition as a way of supplementing and supporting practice. But if it detracts from practice, makes and takes away your interest and your commitment to meditation, and you find you're studying instead of meditating, then that would not be the middle way. So it's a question of looking and being very honest about your own character and your own ability to harmonize study and practice.
Why it is difficult to keep distracting thoughts entering consciousness while meditating, and how I can remove it?
Well, with thoughts, distracting thoughts, agitated thoughts, we have to start off by looking at our way of life and the kind of activities that we partake in that affect our minds, make our minds more prone to agitation. So observing speech that agitates the mind and leaves a trace, the kind of speech where after you've stopped thinking, it's going round and round in your mind and causing mental disturbance. And from that observation, then you're led to sense restraint and to applying mindfulness to the precepts. And so the actions that you take, the speech, the activities, I think particularly these days with social media, and we have opportunities to distract ourselves 24 hours of the day without almost any effort. And the things that distract us, that appear on our screens, they are designed to distract. They're designed to enchant us and absorb our interest. So if you're following the path of peace and to find that inner stability and clarity of mind, then you need to apply your intelligence to creating for yourself an environment, a way of life, a way of living your life, which cuts down as much as possible on things that agitate your mind. So it's not just a matter of finding like a really effective, very powerful meditation technique to deal with agitated thoughts, because you're not dealing with the root cause of them, which, as I say, is a lot to do with the way that you generally live your life. And if you're not being mindful and you're allowing the mind to wander here and wander there throughout the day, it's unrealistic. It's not fair to expect your mind just to change in midstream and just suddenly let go of thoughts and not have that agitation. So the agitation of mind that you experience in meditation is the result of Kamma that you're creating during the day. But also, I think it can be like a wake-up call, in the same way that having an ache or a pain in your body, it's not very pleasant, but there is a silver lining, and it's telling you that there's something that needs looking at and needs dealing with. So if you have consistently experiencing a lot of agitation in meditation, then I would say it's important to look at your daily life, looking at ways of cutting down on entertainments and all the distractions that surround us all these days. As regards the meditation itself, then always we have to be beware of vibhava tanha, which means the desire not to have. So if you want to have a mind which is completely calm and nothing in your mind at all, then agitation is very frustrating, and getting frustrated with agitation and getting discouraged by it and averse to it, these all increase the problem. And so to the very beginning, just to let go of all this negative reaction to agitated thought. So having a basic meditation object like the breath, then we just have to be very patient and confident that this will work out if we stick with it, and bringing the mind back to the object again and again, and developing a sense of appreciation, enjoyment of the meditation object, to the extent that you prefer to be with the breath or your meditation object than to be thinking of this and thinking of that. So creating a very positive relationship between the mind and the meditation object is an important, skillful means. Now, in a case where there's just like a storm of thinking of this and that coming into the mind, the technique that I would recommend is not to fight with that thinking. And if bringing the mind back to the object again and again is not working, then to use the technique of simply being mindful of the thinking. So it's just like it's like a wild horse running around, and instead of trying to lasso it and tying it to a post, then jump onto the back of the horse and just be very mindful of where it goes. And you can try this, but I find myself have found and taught people to do this, is actually surprisingly effective. That people who've never done it will say, well, so you just allow your mind just to go here and go there like a crazy thing, and you're just along for the ride. But no, it's not like that, because once you're on the back of the horse, or you're there with this non-judgmental awareness, the mind just slows down and stops by itself. So thinking and agitation, two elements, two aspects to it. One is like imagery in the mind, and one is like words in the mind. And so in the case that it is essentially words in the mind, then one technique, this is a supplementary technique, is just to grab onto the last word. As you become aware of a sentence, then take the last word or the last couple of words and then consciously repeat them again and again and again and again until the mind becomes bored with it, and it just puts it down without any effort required. It's just boring. And then if it happens again, there's another thought. So let's say another thought comes into the mind, 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 and then it'll let go. And then it'll let go, let go, go, let go, let go, let go. So whatever thought comes into the mind, the moment you're aware of it, this is something you can do, is just consciously repeat the last word or couple of words in the sentence. In the case of imagery, then you can use, I come from a generation where we had televisions when I was a kid, and you turn off the television and it would just sort of go like this, and then there'd be a little light in the middle of the screen, and then the light would disappear. And so for those of you of an older generation, you can remember that or can visualize it, then you can just imagine this image in your mind dissolving into this little light and then disappearing. Or you can use a skillful means similar to grasping onto the last word of a sentence by simply allowing the colors to merge into each other, or to gradually fade away, or just to be there with it and allow it to pass away by itself. So these are some related ideas and skillful means for dealing with agitation. But I would like to repeat that the skillful means by themselves will not be effective if you are not putting effort into reducing distractions and disturbing conduct and speech in your daily life.
Bhante, can you explain a bit more about difference between mindfulness and awareness and consciousness?
I don't know. There's so much variation in the way that these words are used, and different teachers use them in different ways. And so I'm not sure that I can say, this is what this word means, this is what this word means, this is what this word means, and you should just follow that. It's more a matter of listening to teachers and seeing how they use those words themselves. So it's helpful when words have clear parallels in Pali. It's more difficult when there are words from English language, for instance, which are a lot more vague and don't correspond exactly to Pali words, and that's where a lot of the confusion comes. But even with sati or mindfulness, these days then, with the popularity of secular mindfulness, then so many books and so many different groups and teachers of mindfulness that the meaning of mindfulness, the meaning of sati hasn't changed, but the meaning of mindfulness now covers quite a wide spectrum of mental states, and it's not simply the sati that we find in the suttas. So if someone asks me, well, what does mindfulness mean, then I'm not sure that I have the sort of complete answer. I can say what sati means, which is, how sati, how mindful, the word that mindfulness originally seeks to translate. So I think we can say that mindfulness is essentially bringing something to mind, holding it in the mind. And in the case of, say, knowledge from the past, then it has some similarity to memory, in the sense that you are mindful of obligations, you're mindful of instructions from your teacher, you're mindful of the way to repair a car or something. You have studied, and you're able to bring the knowledge that you need to the present moment in order to deal with a particular task or problem. In the case of in meditation practice itself, then your task is to bear the object in mind and not allow it to slip away. So the failure of mindfulness is like allowing the object to slip out of the mind. So you're no longer holding that object in I say in awareness, so holding that object in the present moment. So so I think that we can distinguish between mindfulness of something that we are recalling from the past and mindfulness of a present object, but the function is similar. So then we have the accompanying term sampajanya, or clear comprehension. And whereas sati is included within the samadhi group of the threefold training, sampajanya is included in the wisdom training. So it's the wisdom aspect. And what complicates this question is that quite often the Buddha spoke about mindfulness without referring to sampajanya, which is usually translated as clear comprehension or full awareness sometimes. But it's clear that he is not speaking of a mindfulness which is without sampajanya. I hope you can understand that. So my understanding of this is that it was just shorthand term. So instead of saying sati sampajanya, the Buddha said sati on many occasions, meaning sati containing sampajanya, or sati with sampajanya, or sampajanya in brackets, if you like. So sometimes he distinguished between the two, and sometimes he didn't. When he didn't, it was assuming that sati in that case includes sampajanya. So this is why study is a little bit difficult sometimes, and we're speculating somewhat on words that were spoken 2,000 more years ago, and the commentaries are not always that helpful. But sampajanya, the wisdom faculty, let's say you lose your mindfulness and you're thinking about this and thinking about that, and then you realize, oh, I've lost the thread, I've lost my breath. What I'm thinking about now is not what I intended to be thinking about. That's sampajanya. So there's this kind of wisdom that, oh, you've lost the way. This is not what you should be doing. Wisdom aware of the purpose of what you're doing, and to what extent what you are doing is in harmony with the realization of your goal. So these two things go together. So awareness is kind of like a rather ambiguous term, and I think in that case I'm not going to define it because it depends exactly what you want to use it for. Consciousness is the translation of vijnana, so we have the consciousness arising at the eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, mind. So it's that simple quality of knowing in its most basic kind of sense. So knowing that there is something impinging on the eye, knowing that something is impinging on the ear, but the kind of knowing that that's Ajahn Jayasaro on the screen, or that's an insect flying across the screen, though that's a different kind of knowing. That's the sanya knowing. So vijnana is the kind of knowing or consciousness, which is a sort of the absolute basic awareness of the presence of an object.
Bhante, how to understand 3 phases and 12 aspects of Four Noble Truths?
Sorry, I missed that. How to understand?
How to understand 3 phases and 12 aspects of Four Noble Truths?
What was the first one? The
3 phases.
3 phases. Oh, okay. 3 phases and 12 aspects. Yeah, okay. So if we take the Four Noble Truths, dukkha, samudaya, nirodha, and magga, or suffering, cause of suffering, cessation, and the path to cessation, on the Buddhists identified his enlightenment with his full penetration of the Four Noble Truths, and explains that in the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, his first discourse, explains that the insights, the knowledge that came to him on the night of his enlightenment could be divided into 3 phases. So you have 3 phases of Four Noble Truths. 3 multiplied by 4 is 12. So with each one, the first is there is suffering. So it's the recognition of the existence of dukkha, of suffering. So that was the first knowledge, insight that arose in his mind. And the second was that the correct response to that knowledge, or the correct practice, or the duty that one has towards suffering or dukkha, and that he understood to be full comprehension. And the third phase was that he realized that he had fully fulfilled that second phase. He had fully comprehended dukkha. So for the First Noble Truth, the first insight, there is dukkha. Second, dukkha is something that should be fully comprehended. And thirdly, I have fully comprehended. In the second, there is samudaya, there is a cause of dukkha. It's not just the will of God, or it's not just random, but there is cause of dukkha, tanha, craving based on ignorance. And that was the first of the insights. The second is that craving or samudaya should be abandoned. And the third level was, I have abandoned craving. So in a similar pattern, the third noble truth of cessation, realizing there is cessation of dukkha. And secondly, that cessation of dukkha should be realized. And thirdly, I have realized that cessation. The fourth, he realized that there is a path to that cessation, the Eightfold Path, and that path, second insight, that path should be followed. And thirdly, or developed, I think is the word. And lastly, I have developed that path. So four noble truths, just the insight into the existence of the Four Noble Truths. The second round of insights is the correct way to practice or to deal with them, to relate to them. And the last round, the recognition that the Buddha has completed his practice regarding the Four Noble Truths. So Four Noble Truths with three rounds of insight makes 12 altogether, 12 phases, or I can't remember the word.
Bhante can focus on five hindrances in short. Can teach about five hindrances in short, how to reduce it.
Okay, so there are many different ways of talking about defilement and many different groups of defilement. And these groups differ in that they appear in different contexts or in different ways of looking at practice and different ways of looking at the mind. And one of the most common of these groups, and the one the Buddha gave great importance to, is the five hindrances. And we can say samadhi really begins where the five hindrances end, or that the five hindrances are the defilements of mind which are exposed by meditation practice. They are hindrances both to the peace of mind and quality of mind, and also to wisdom. So there can be no real progress in Dhamma unless we can learn how to abandon these defilements. The first of these defilements is the attachment to the desire for the things that we like, basically. So the word Kamma, in K, long A, M-A, Kamma, sensuality, is sometimes taken to refer too much to the really coarser aspects of sensuality, particularly sexual feelings. But in fact, it's much wider than that. And I prefer to talk about Kamma as anything that you like to think about, anything that when you get stressed out, when you get upset about anything, when you're bored, when you're depressed, you like to think about that thing and it makes you feel good. So it might be about some pleasant experience in the past, or might be about food, or it might be music, or it might be some entertainment of some kind or another, but it might be or sport, or it might be something to do with the world and politics and anything basically that you find interesting that you like to think about. And when the mind becomes bored with the meditation object or is unable to sustain its focus on the meditation object, it will often tend to look for some kind of small enjoyment and entertainment with a memory or imagination of some kind. So this goes, as I say, the whole spectrum from the coarsest kinds of sexual fantasies all the way to quite noble matters, but the underlying mental stages of one of interest in the pleasure of thinking about something. The second is sort of mirror opposite, where the mind indulges in thinking about people, things that we don't like. It can be recalling people's actions and speech that have hurt us, that we don't like, or it could be aversion to the people around us, the situation. The mind can latch onto almost anything and feel angry about it if it wants, and irritated, and why is it like this? Shouldn't be like this, and the thing is, there's a kind of for some people, there's a kind of perverse enjoyment in being really negative about something, getting caught up in thinking all the bad things about somebody or something. And it's a way of escaping from the present moment and distracting oneself from the meditation object. So it's not necessarily the really vicious and vyapada, the Pali word, can suggest quite strong negative emotion, but it's any kind of negativity and indulging in it, and it can be quite mild and on quite innocuous subjects. The third hindrance is covers areas of stiffness of mind and laziness of body, sloth and torpor. So somebody just see your whole body is, it can't be bothered, you feel you just want to go and lay down. Or the mind is very kind of stiff and won't go to the meditation object. There's a simile given by one of the great Tibetan teachers of trying to spread butter out of the, it won't be out of the fridge, would it be? Like out of a Tibetan cave, maybe, onto bread. So you have something that's like really, really hard and trying to spread it on something. That's the idea of that kind of stiffness of mind, and that stiffness of mind can be quite subtle, and many meditators get caught in that state where kind of quiet, there's not a lot of agitation in the mind, but it's not samadhi, it's just this very refined stiffness of mind, which is hindrance. So again, this you go from this very coarse kind of nodding and falling asleep during meditation to kind of resistance and boredom and dull, stiff states of mind, going up to quite refined dullness, which can easily be mistaken for a state of meditation. The fourth hindrance is agitation, which I've spoken about at some length earlier in this session. And it also includes like guilty thoughts, just going over and over things you did and shouldn't have done or shouldn't have done and did. And if only this had happened, if only that happened, I'm such a bad person. And this kind of indulgence in self-recrimination over actions, speech in the past. This is kind of one aspect of this hindrance. So it's different from hiriotapa and recognizing one's behaved poorly and revealing this and not hiding it and making a determination not to behave, not to speak in such a way again in the future. This is different from the hindrance where we're just going over and over, and it's very much based on self, and I'm such a bad person, and I shouldn't have done this, and I should have been better than that. So that's a very toxic way of thinking, and it's a hindrance. And the last of the hindrances is skeptical doubt. Now, it's important to recognize that not all doubt is criticized by the Buddha or considered to be a hindrance. Indeed, the Buddha praised lay Buddhists sometimes, or lay villagers, not necessarily Buddhists, that you're doubting about things that should be doubted about. Sometimes doubt is a sign of wisdom and humble heart, that you recognize you don't have all the information that you need to make a good decision, good judgment. And so you recognize, I'm not really sure about this. I don't really have all the information I need. So that kind of doubt is not a hindrance, quite the contrary. But the skeptical doubt that is an obstacle in meditation is when you just where you reach the point where you have to make a choice and apply effort, and you still want some kind of guarantees before you put any effort into something that it will really work out, and there are no such guarantees, and constantly reevaluating and worrying about the practice and the teachings, every twist and turn of the path, or every difficulty that it comes out, maybe I got this wrong, maybe this isn't right, and maybe I should try something else. And so that's the most debilitating of the hindrances. With the others, you've got anger in your mind, or you've got sensuality in your mind. You say, I got a problem, I've got to deal with this. But with the fifth hindrance, maybe you don't even think you've got a problem, or do I have a problem? Maybe I don't. Maybe this is no. So you can just go around in circles with that one. So those are the five hindrances, and the Buddha encouraged us to study them and learn from them. And so they're teachers in some ways, because they're showing how the unenlightened mind works and what triggers these hindrances. What feeds them, what reduces their power, what eliminates them. This is really important work that we can do to understand these hindrances. The Buddha says that, there are a number of similes for the hindrances, and some of these you'll be familiar with. The one with imagining the mind is like a bowl of water. And the first simile is like put all these different colors in the water. With all different colors, the transparency of the water disappears, and you cannot see through the water to whatever's below it. So that's a simile for the first. The second is if you've got boiling the water, so it's agitated, and again, we can't see through the water, so there's no wisdom there, and there's no peace to the water because the water's bubbling up with anger. With the third hindrance, it's as if there's some mossy green algae or overgrowth covering over the pond, covering over the water, so you can't see the water itself, and certainly can't see through the water. Fourth is like there are the agitation. It's like there are waves in the water, and the fifth is like the water is concealed in darkness, and you can't see the way ahead. So you can't see the water at all. Excuse me. So I won't go into all the similes for the five hindrances, but again, there's important that the way that you're living your life, keeping precepts, being mindful, being restraining the senses, living with contentment, kindness and generosity to those around you, living your life in a dhammic way, and one which is in harmony with the principles of Dhamma. This is reducing the food or the ground for the hindrances. In practice, being very patient, developing chanda and enthusiasm for the practice, faith that the practice really works, learning from experience, and just applying oneself with patience and consistency and good humor. Don't get on your own case. Don't be too critical when you get caught up and distracted by hindrances and defilements. They say, okay, it's like teaching a child. Well, it's the way kids are. Made a mistake. Stop. Start again. So very, very, it's consistency, patience, maintaining or creating this real interest and commitment to practice. And these defilements, these hindrances will gradually fade away.
But is it okay to take a few questions? Yes,
we can go till 7:30.
Okay. Bhante, how can one encourage oneself to meditate and to enjoy meditation?
Well, first of all, meditation has to be seen not as a kind of a special activity and something separate from the rest of your life, and it has to be integrated into your whole way of living your life, as I've mentioned on a number of occasions. I would say that it's important to keep coming back to the Four Noble Truths, and to reflect that dukkha arises dependent on defilement. Dukkha ceases with the cessation of defilement. So, and the cessation of defilement comes about through practice of the Eightfold Path, or development of Sila, Samadhi, Panya. Now, if that's the case, then as long as there's defilement in our minds, we'll never know liberation from dukkha. Unless we develop the Eightfold Path, we'll never know true happiness. So if we accept that observation, that teaching, then it means we have very important tasks to see to in our life. One is, how can we prevent as yet unarisen defilement from arising in our mind? Secondly, how do we deal with the defilements that are already arisen? How can we introduce into the mind the virtues that have not yet appeared in the mind, and how can we take care of those virtues that have arisen and develop them until they reach maturity. Now, I would say that the practice of Buddhist meditation is the only activity ever devised and ever encouraged in the history of human race, which answers those four important challenges at the same time. So when you're meditating, putting your mind on your breath, for instance, your first challenge is, how can I sustain attention on my breath in such a way that hindrances won't arise? And then if hindrances do arise, how do I get rid of them? How do I introduce into the mind mindfulness, clear comprehension, patience, contentment, etc.? And in the cases where they have already arisen, then how can I develop them to their highest level? So when you're meditating, this is exactly what you're doing, isn't it? You're applying mindfulness and patience and contentment and so on, and developing them. So in the beginning of meditation, you're working a lot more with those first two, with hindrances, and then as the meditation develops, you're moving more into the realm of the bojjhangas, or the 7 enlightenment factors. So I find this a very good reflection to say, well, why meditate? Well, why do anything? Basically, I mean, why live your life? What's the purpose of your life? If your goal is liberation, then meditation is the only or the most effective way of leading yourself onwards to that liberation which you aspire to. Without meditation, then it'll never happen. So keep coming back to the reasons, the ultimate reasons, and not just caught up in the daily meditation session, but reminding oneself of the big picture and the overall path that you're seeking to follow in life. The most motivating factor in any activity, whether it's worldly or spiritual, is progress. And the reason why people become unmotivated in meditation practice, I think, is because they set their sights too high and overlook the minor advances and the minor victories that one achieves during the day, and just in terms of becoming a little bit more patient, a little bit more aware, a little bit kinder, a little bit more patient, and so on. So looking at bringing your sight down and looking just at the general improvements in your ability to keep precepts and generosity and kindness and patience and integrity and these things, rather than looking at samadhi and enlightenment, that those things will come about in their own time. But in the meantime, as a skillful means of motivating yourself to keep up the practice, then come down a bit and just look at increases in the quality of your life and relationships with the people around you. Having a group of friends is very helpful. You will have ups and downs, and sometimes when maybe your health is not so good, or you're very busy, you've got some kind of crisis in your working life or your daily life, then having good friends and being able to share with them and to encourage each other is also contributes a lot to keep going in meditation, and don't be too result oriented in the short term, because that's a sure way to disappointment for most people. You might be one of the lucky ones, but with a lot of Pārami. But basically, there's going to be a lot of ups and downs, and it's going to be snakes and ladders rather than a stairway to heaven. And so you have to be very, very patient and consistent in your efforts.
Bhante, how can one overcome fear?
Overcome
Fear.
Fear?
Yes.
Fear, okay. Well, fear is the default for an unenlightened being, basically, because the attachment and the view of Sammāditthi, a view of body and mind as being self, creates the opposite, what's not self. And so you have this dilemma of looking after yourself and protecting it from everything else that's not yourself, and sense of vulnerability and fear of what might happen to self. So at one level or another, there is going to be a certain amount of fear, and certainly fear of death is repressed and tends to be manifest in other areas of life. A lot of time when people talk about fear, I think talking about anxiety, fear of losing face, fear of separation from from the loved, fear of having to suffer in the future, and these are actually more like anxious thoughts about the future. Fear itself is, I would restrict to things like sort of fear of ghosts, fear of an immediate, imminent danger. So the heart's racing and the adrenaline's flowing, and I think the other kinds of fear are more to do with worry and anxiety and thinking. So I'm going to just answer about fear for the time being in my definition. And I would say that with strong emotions like fear, there is both a mental and a physical component or dimension, and that it's most effective to bring the attention to the physical sensations in the body from the head to the foot, to do a kind of a scan, somewhat in the style of Mr. Goenka, or to adapt as you feel fit, but adopting this interested, curious scan of what's going on. What is fear? Where does fear manifest in the body? Is there fear in the head, fear in the face, fear in the shoulders, fear in the chest, fear in the belly, fear in the back? Where is it? What's it feel like? What is this fear? So rather than being afraid of fear and reacting to the fear, and then grounding awareness, grounding the mind in the experience of the body in the present moment. And that will in itself stop the mind from running wildly after, oh, what was that? Is this, is it this, is it that? So I'm thinking in the case of sort of ghosts and things like that. If you try to be too rational about your fears and sort of argue with yourself, maybe you can stop the crazy thinking and emotion for a while. But if the adrenaline's already been flowing and the body is in an altered state through the fear, then the physical sensations will tend to trigger a whole new wave of fearful thoughts shortly after you brought the mind back to a certain sense of calm. So grounding awareness in the physical reality that we call fear is, I would say, the most effective way of dealing with it. With the anxious thoughts about the future and about what happens if, what if that happens, what if this happens, and then that's a stinking problem, and one in which we need to have that kind of sharpness of mind which recognizes as the mind begins on this kind of train of thought, and can let it go right at the very beginning and not allowing it to follow along that path. Because the longer you leave it, then the more difficult it becomes. And things that only have a very slight chance of occurring. And the more you think about it, then the more real it becomes. You know, even the most outlandish kind of possibility starts to seem like it really could happen, simply because you think about it a lot. So anxiety is a matter of much sharp mindfulness and letting go of this toxic thinking right at the beginning before they gather too much momentum. Whereas fear, I'm advocating grounding awareness in the physical reality.
Bhante, is it okay to take one more question?
Yes, okay.
Bhante, first of all, greetings, and I am so much grateful for you taking your time out to interact with us. Ajahn Chah's Remembrance Day was just a day before yesterday. So can you share some anecdotes?
This thing, everybody's heard all these anecdotes before. I would the one that had meaning for me personally when I was first let me say when I first arrived at Wat Pah Pong. This was in December of 1978, and I was wearing white. I'd spent a few months with Ajahn Sumedho in the monastery in England, and come out to Thailand in November and traveled around a little bit, and eventually arrived at Wat Pah Pong on the full moon day of December in 78. And the monks had just completed their Patimokkha recitation, and Ajahn Chah was sitting under his kuti, speaking with his disciples. And I was met at the gate by an Australian monk who looked after me and took me to see Ajahn Chah. And when I saw him, then I immediately had this very emotional reaction. I said, "Oh, this is what it means to be an arahant. This is what an arahant is." Of course, I had no way of telling who's an arahant, who's not an arahant, and no special knowledge of any kind. But the faith arose very strongly in my mind, and then after the monk, he introduced me and told me that I come from England, that I'd been a student of Ajahn Sumedho. Lumpur Chah, he was drinking from a cup of herbal honey flavored herbal tea, and he called me over to him, and I crawled in front of all the people there over, and he gave me this his cup of tea to drink. So I looked kind of pretty worn out or something, but that was compare it with worldly, and it's like I fell in love with him at that moment, and it was the faith and this sort of sense of personal connection, and I think that kind of faith is what stood me in good stead throughout the next months and years, when there are some very difficult times, and it's not easy being a monk in a forest monastery in those days. Hard life, and physically hard life as well. But it was not so much my knowledge of the teachings, and I had studied quite a lot before I arrived at the monastery, but just this absolute confidence that there is such a thing as Nibbana. There are people in this day and age who are realizing Nibbana, the path is open, and all it remains is to follow the path which has been illuminated by monks like my teacher. So looking back on those early days, it wasn't that there was such a great number of very profound teachings, and of course for the first year or so I couldn't understand Thai very well also, but it was his example, and with a teacher like that, there's no question about trying to be mindful. You just feel you have to be mindful. You cannot be unmindful in his presence, and you feel it's like a mirror. Every small fault in yourself becomes painfully obvious, and so you just feel uplifted being around someone like that, and just seeing how important and how necessary it is to follow this path of practice. Okay.
Sadhu, Bhante. Thank you. Ravindra sir.
Yes, sir.
Conclude Kasarasam.
I think maybe enough for tonight, and we may have.
Yes.
Yes, Bhante. Blessings, Bhante.
You're welcome.
Bhante, we want blessings from you.
Okay, I give you the Yatha varivaha pura paripurenti sagarang hevami vaito tinang petanang upakapati ichitang batitang tumhang kipamiwa samityato sapphe purentu sankapa janto panaraso yatha manichotiraso yatha sapitiyo vivachanto Sabharokho vinasato mate mawatwantarayo sukhi tikha yukho bhava abhivatana silisa nityang vatha pachahino Chataro dhamma vatanti ayuvano sukhang phalang. So I wish you all very good health and to be firmly established in dana and sila and pavana. May your defilements wither away every day and become less and less, and the virtues and goodness in your heart grow and flower and come to fruition. May you all be well.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.